Good day. This is Chuck Cameron with Oxford Community TV. The My Life program has all kinds of great folks we get to interview. And today we got another dandy. I'm having fun talking to Doug Meyer, who is an Oxford resident for way longer than I've been. And he and I are going to talk today. Doug, thank you for coming in.
My pleasure.
Thank you for giving us some time. I'm looking forward to digging through and finding out what the CIA didn't tell me about who you really are. All right?
I appreciate that.
So what are you up to today? Let's start with what you're doing right now, and then we'll sneak back.
Well, I think the best way to explain it is I'm at the tail end of work career.
Okay.
I am 66, so I haven't formally retired, but that's in the next year or two we'll decide when's the right time to take the walk. My wife and I travel. I don't work the hours I used to, Chuck. It's much easier now. I used to burn the midnight coil and work 80 hours a week, and that was just tremendous. Got 4 grandchildren.
Excellent. Local?
Yeah, I have 2 that live in Metamora. They're with my son Mikey. Everybody knows Mikey. And then Charlie is now in the area of Illinois where the cornfields meet the city suburbs.
Yeah, right.
And he married a girl whose grandfather farms 5,000 acres.
Wow.
And I have 2 grandchildren out there. And then my daughter, my middle child, who people that were involved in wrestling didn't see much.
Right.
For a good reason. She said, I don't want to go to another wrestling tournament. She's now the principal and the head of the outdoor education outreach program for Bloomfield Hills down at Bowers Farm.
Excellent, excellent. So what a great story. Lots of history. Let's take a look back and figure out where you started. Our goal is, as always, to figure out the kinds of influences and the kinds of activities that resulted in the person we're talking to today.
Okay.
Talk about when you were a kid. Where'd you grow up?
Yep.
Did you have any family? What was home like?
Well, I had 5 brothers and sisters,
Okay.
3 sisters, 2 brothers. So we lived in a small 3-bedroom ranch, which worked out because you had to stack 3 kids in each.
Yeah, you did.
Had 1 bathroom, and I had some neighbors that didn't even have indoor plumbing yet.
Whereabouts were you?
We were in Livingston County near Hell, Michigan. Went to Stockbridge to school. Pinckney was my address, and Gregory was my telephone exchange.
Wow.
So we were in the middle of nowhere.
You were?
Closest neighbor was a half a mile.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
So where in all the kids are you?
I am next to the youngest.
Got it.
Had sister, my oldest sister is about a 1968 graduate. That's the easiest way to remember it.
Yep.
Another one in 69, another in 70, another in 72. I was a 74 graduate, and my little sister was a 77 graduate.
Excellent. I like to hang around with young people. You make me feel young. I always appreciate that.
My body doesn't, but
No.
my mind does.
Got it. So we're way out in Livingston. You're out in the country. What was it like in your home? What was home like?
Well, you were pretty busy. So my father didn't have enough money to go into the larger scale farming. So he went to work in the late 50s, early 60s. But we still had a small farm where you could raise your own beef, raise your own pigs. We were heavily involved in 4-H and the Cub Scouts. Yep. Everybody in the country knew everybody.
Right.
And I believe there was only one church in town, and it was Baptist. Yep. And it wasn't so much that's what you followed. That was the only church.
That's where you went.
That's right. Yep. So, but the Cub Scouts were a big factor. 4-H was a huge factor. Yeah. And other than that, I remember not having an easy way to get around. So when I wanted to go play baseball with the guys, I had to jump on the bike and ride 4 or 5 miles to find, where everybody was kind of meeting, because we were all similar.
Yep, you're all country boys.
That's right. And we would all, Unadilla was where we usually would meet for our little ball games. Yeah. And then the town of Gregory is where we went to elementary school. And some of my brothers and sisters, before everything was consolidated, I think even had an exposure to one-room schoolhouses. Okay. And then in the late, 50s and 60s, consolidation started happening.
Got it. So grew up Small town, literally small town,
Yes.
out in the country.
Great way to compare it is
Yeah.
Leonard to Oxford.
Got it.
My little town had an elementary, only had one room of each,
Right. Right.
but that was a good way to compare it.
Okay. Growing up, did you have any hobbies or interests? What did you like to do?
Well, I had a 410 and a 22,
Outstanding.
and camp out, because what'd you do when you're out in the middle of nowhere? You couldn't go to the movies.
Go play in the woods.
We would play in the woods, and since we butchered beef and had a freezer full of meat, you'd basically go to the grocery store one day a month to get the staples. But we could always sneak something out of the freezer to barbecue out in the woods when we're camping.
Of course.
Yeah.
Very good. So, were there people in your life when you were young who had a pretty good influence on you, or bad, either way?
Yeah. How's the best way to put it? I had a grandfather who was my mother's father,
Sure.
who was from Detroit and moved out there. I think he was maybe the person who was more goal-oriented, more business-oriented, whereas my father's family was more farm-oriented. So that man always told me, he says, pick up golf, because that's the game you can play forever with business associates.
Good.
Well, I never was very good at golf.
Got it. All right. So, but do you enjoy the sport, or did?
Well, I'm always involved with the local activities here.
Sure.
I'll sponsor a couple of foursomes, and I'll play in the Parks and Rec Open,
Yep.
Ron Davis's family's outings, things like that. But yeah, I just never really took the time to become proficient at it.
In school, were you in sports?
Yeah, yes, I was. Back then, you didn't have as many available sports.
Sure.
I think the only sport we had in junior high was basketball, and I'm a little bit on the short and stocky side, so basketball was not my sport. But then in high school, I played three: baseball, wrestling, and football.
Excellent.
But we had no premeditated youth sports before that, except baseball had a little bit, but it was 10 miles away. And so I couldn't always get to it.
Yep.
But then in high school, I played all three sports. Wrestling was one I knew nothing about, but got grabbed coming out of gym class.
Yep.
Said, looks like you're going to be a wrestler.
Yes.
And the rest is history.
And the rest is history.
Yeah.
And that was a while ago.
That would have been in, I guess, the late 60s, early 70s.
So that was high school.
Yeah, because that was the first exposure
Sure. Yep.
to most sports in the country.
Sure, exactly. All right. So then you've been involved one way or another, and we'll find more about this in our next segment, with wrestling for a long time.
Yeah. So wrestling was my best sport, and it also occurred in the winter.
Yeah.
And being a young guy, I had to find a way to pay for my car. So the first sport to go was baseball.
Yep.
Spring plantings and things on the farm.
Summer at work.
And then fall, I was still trying to make enough money, so I gave up football. My senior year, baseball my junior year.
Got it.
Because the car came into play sophomore year.
Got it. Yeah, so you gotta make money to drive around.
Oh, yeah. And then, so wrestling, I continued on for all 4 years.
Excellent.
My claim to fame is I never wrestled a JV match.
All right, you started big, huh?
Well, we were in a small school.
Yeah,
But, yeah,
right.
but I was a farm boy, so,
Yeah, so strong.
yes.
Good, excellent. Well, let's do this then. We're going to wrap this section up.
Okay.
When we come back, let's take a look at once you got out of high school, what did life look at? Where'd you go? What'd you do? And who'd you meet?
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
It'd be great.
Good to talk, by the way.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed this.
My pleasure.
All right, we'll see you all in a minute. Okay, we're back. Lots of good stories here.
Yeah.
So you're in high school, so let's get you out of high school.
Okay.
By the way, were there any teachers in high school that had an influence on you?
It's probably the one guy that really stands out was the young teacher that came in, was a college baseball player and a college football player, but he had to teach wrestling. He'd never seen it. So that was my wrestling coach in high school, and he went on to win a national championship with Albion College. His name was Pete Schmidt. Now gone.
So he knew what he was doing because he learned from the bottom up, huh?
He went to Alma College, I believe. He was from Port Austin, up at the tip of the thumb.
Sure.
And young guy out of college, got his first teaching degree with us, or teaching job with us, and then went on to move to like Okemos, and then climbed the ladder, small college, and then claim to fame, won a national championship with Albion. I want to say that would have been a D3 or D2, somewhere in there.
Got it. Okay.
But that was probably the most memorable teacher.
Somebody had a real influence on you.
Well, yeah, he was that guy that, cracked the whip, and you were a young guy, and you said, yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
That's how we do this.
We all needed that, though.
Oh, yeah.
We still do.
Yep.
Okay, so let's get you out of high school. Once you get out of high school, what'd you do?
Well, the spring of my senior year, my counselor came to me and said, Doug, they want you to be a wrestler at Central Michigan University. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, I said, I think I was going to put my app in at Ford Wixom, and I put my app in at Central, had to take the ACTs and things, and had about a C+ average in high school, but north of 30 on the ACTs. So teacher looked at me and says, I get it. So anyway, that fall, when Central came around, it would have been the last week of August or first week of September. I had not gotten a call from Ford Wixom, so I went to college. Ford Wixom called at the end of September. If they would have called in mid-August, the path might have been different.
It might have been different.
Yeah. Path might have been different.
So you wrestled while you were in college?
I went out the first year, saw what was going on, and I don't believe my talent was as good as that level. And plus, freshman in college, there's a whole bunch of things going on up there.
There are things other than wrestling, aren't
Funny
there?
how that is.
Yes, it is. I've read about that. I do remember that, vaguely. All right. So then you're at Central. What'd you do?
I was there for 3 or 4 years, and I was going into general business with a minor in rec, because back then Parks and Rec was starting to get big, and Central was probably the most known college for that general direction. And I'd originally thought about teacher and coach. Then I moved on from that thinking, well, maybe get into the business world. And then with recreation as a minor, maybe get into running a golf course, things like that. Not sure. 20 years old.
It's a pretty good time to be not sure.
Right. No, I get it. And then the rest is history, because when I was about 22, the owner of what is now known as PK Contracting bought the student house I was living in, told me at the end of the term, going to have to move out. He was going to have his brothers, and he was just starting his company, have his brothers come up and live in that house for the summer and help him work. And one thing led to another, and he asked me, he says, you know how to drive a stick shift? I said, yeah, I know how to do that.
Farm boy.
And the rest is history. So I went to work that summer, and minimum wage at the time, I don't know, buck 65 maybe, buck 35, whatever it was. And I was afraid to ask him what he was going to pay me, but I figured construction, I'd be making good money. I didn't know what I made the first year, because he'd give me a check at the end of the week. And I had 6 or 8 of them on my dresser because I couldn't cash them. And he came to me and he said, Doug, you got to cash those checks. I said, well, I need a day off. Because banks, 9
to 5.
And I didn't have any sort of there was no such thing as a debit card, and I didn't know how to do any direct deposit at that time. So I've been with that company now 44 years.
Outstanding. So while you're doing all that, did you find anybody did any female get your attention along the way?
Well, for the first 3 or 4 years of college, that's probably why I didn't wrestle.
I see.
But
you were focused on developing your social life.
When I was 24, I went to my owner's brother's wedding. They were originally from Berkeley, Michigan, and my wife's from Huntington Woods, which went to Berkeley High School. So she was the maid of honor in the wedding, and the rest is history.
She caught your attention.
I got married 1 year later.
Excellent. Now, did you bring her out to the
Well-
wild wilderness out here?
So for that, call it 11 months, I was traveling the state, striping roads, so I was everywhere.
Yep.
So the way it started out was her and my boss, or my boss's brother, who became the president of the company in today's world. His wife would want somebody to ride with her, so they might meet us, and we'd take a Sunday off in Kalkaska, Michigan, or
nice.
Alpena, or Manistee, wherever. And so on the weekends, we would try to, if I did take a day off, because back then you'd kind of work a lot of 7-day weeks.
You work what you could.
Yes, we did. And so then we'd hook up and do this and do that. And then we got married in April of, I'm going to say, 1981. And what happened then was we first made our first home in Mount Pleasant.
Okay.
Because the company was based in that area.
Got it.
Then the company decided to move down near the city because there was more work.
business, yeah. Got it.
And so we followed.
It does follow. Yeah, it makes good sense. So you got married. You had a good job. You're working hard, lots of hours. Did you get along with this guy who was the owner of the company, or?
The owner's brother, who has elevated to he's CEO, and we have since been bought by a big conglomerate, was a very good personal friend. And we were godparents to his kids.
Nice.
They were godparents to a lot of our kids.
Yeah.
And then the company just expounded,
Yep.
and we went from 4 employees to where we were north of 200 now.
I would say that's growth.
Yeah.
Serious growth.
Yep.
So you're working hard. Along the way, did you two have any kids?
Yeah, my wife and I think our first anniversary she announced.
Well, happy anniversary.
Yeah.
Yes. Things do happen, don't
Yeah.
they?
And I had a son,
Yep.
Charlie,
Yep.
born that December. So
Right.
that would have been, gosh, she might have been 2 months when she announced to me.
Yep.
And then had 2 more after that.
Outstanding. A boy, a girl, a boy, if I remember right.
Now, a funny story.
All right.
The first one was born in Mount Pleasant.
Right.
Second, when I moved to Berkeley for a short window and had one there. Then I moved to Oxford and had my third. So I'm not moving.
No. So there, you see, there's a pattern here. No, sweetheart, we're not going to move to Mount Clemens. No, we're not.
No.
All right, good enough. Okay, well then, when we get back, we'll figure out a little bit more about what happened from then on.
Yep.
And what it was like to be a dad. And we'll talk a little bit about what you've been doing since then, okay?
Good.
All right, we'll check back in a minute.
Thank you.
All right, stay tuned. Okay, I think we're back. So, you've done a lot. You've got 3 kids. Where were you living when the third one happened? And from then on, what did you do up here in Oxford? How'd you get up here? We're blessed to have you, but how'd you get up here?
Well, a quick summation. I followed the company, I think I mentioned in the last, to Berkeley.
Yep.
And I bought an old fixer-upper with the idea of moving more rural because I was originally from the country.
Yep.
I was really not involved or interested in living in the city.
Berkeley.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Neighbor.
Yeah, 40-foot lots, and everybody had the same
Yes, sir.
bungalow.
Yes, sir.
So, and I found this little lot up here in Oxford, and I told my wife, I said, honey, I said, I think we'd like it, but it was in the middle of nowhere at that time.
Yep.
There was no Great Lakes crossing. We didn't have the subdivisions up and down. We didn't have Waterstone. There was a small sub behind Clear Lake Elementary, and I live out just west of Clear Lake Elementary. Everything's built up on drainer, much like it has everywhere.
Sure.
And decided that that's where we were going to make our home, and we built there. And it was the summer that Charlie was entering kindergarten, so my kids have done 100% of their K through 12 education in Oxford.
Out here. All right. So they're going to, your kids are going to school now out here. You've got a home out here. How are the neighbors? Do you know folks in your community? Do you know folks in your neighborhood?
Well, the when I first moved out here, in the exact year, must have been around the late 80s when I built.
Sure.
That was when Oxford was realizing some nice success in sports. The football team won a state championship and were runners-up a couple of years. Well, the next door neighbor was Steve McCracken, who was the star running back.
Got it.
And then had a couple of other guys that were from that same era that Coach Rowley, obviously I love my sports. Bud Rowley was one of the first people I met.
Ah, good.
And at that time, for a short window, Don Maskell was our athletic director.
Excellent.
I can't remember how long of a term he was here for, but then he moved over to Rochester. I think he was more like me because he's a little younger than myself, so he might have been at the start of his career.
Right. To go up.
That's right.
So you in sports are joined at the hip.
Yeah.
You like it.
So the way it all started with my connection to wrestling was when I was in Berkeley for that year. My brother-in-law, Teresa's brother, said, hey, let's take our boys over to a wrestling program for youth. And I'm sitting there going, I'm in. It's the winter time, I've got time. So we go to Hazel Park, who back in the 80s dominated Oakland County. We go to Hazel Park at Hoover Elementary. I was there for a year or two and then moved to Oxford. And the only established program out this way, really of any substance, was Clarkston.
Okay.
So when I moved out here the first winter, I took my son to the Clarkston program.
Sure.
And obviously, if I'm involved, I'm not sitting in the corner.
I would imagine if you're involved, you're involved.
I'm involved.
Yeah.
So the family there, I call it the family, the wrestling family there, headed by Brent Mickelson, and then Mike DeGane came in a little later. Clarkston having some real success in wrestling spurred our interest. But my wife actually came up with the idea, I think when Charlie was in third grade, said, you know, you're putting all this effort in for their community to build their program.
Interesting.
And I had a couple of Oxford kids follow me to the Clarkston program that I'd met through T-ball or youth soccer, something like that. And so I started it in approximately 91 or 92. And the Parks and Rec director at that time was Mark Brochu.
Okay.
And Oxford still had the original wrestling mat they bought in 1974, and that was it.
That was it.
So that fall when I started the club, I said, well, I put in my name to the league, and I said, I'd like to hold a tournament.
Right.
They said, all the dates are full, but you could hold one between Christmas and New Year's. I said, oh, okay. So I asked my club, and I had probably the first year north of 60 people
Really?
out for the program.
Excellent.
Well, it was everybody we had met through the elementary. None of them had experience in wrestling, and most of their parents didn't either.
But it was something local, and they could say, hey, let's try.
Well, it's like being on the same soccer team. I didn't know anything about soccer, but our kids played soccer, T-ball, a little bit of this, much like lacrosse in today's world. And it wasn't around back then. So the rest is history. We started a program. I called it the North Oakland Wranglers because I was making it so that Brandon, Lake Orion, anybody up this way could join the program.
Not exclusive Oxford.
That's right.
Just big tent.
Then a year or two into it, I had to make it Oxford because I was north of 100 kids. And I just couldn't do it.
Success.
So we said, okay, you got to start your own program. And there was a guy named Floyd Rowe that was with the Orion program. He then realized it because we were just too big. Didn't have enough room to practice.
Wow.
And our club has since donated many wrestling mats and things to the varsity program, bought many of the warm-ups and things like that, and helped to build to the success. When I first came here, Bud Rowley was the football and the wrestling coach.
Got it.
And what I went to Bud about, and not a lot of people would he listen to. I was fortunate.
Yeah. Well, typically you earn the respect from people like that. They don't hand it to you.
And he realized, because I told him I wanted a guy with his passion in the wrestling room.
Yep.
And they said, what about you? I said, I can't.
Yeah.
I work in the private sector.
Get it. Gotta go.
I said, I'll be the biggest promoter and booster that you ever saw, but I didn't have the time to be a head coach, per se. But this claim to fame is phenomenal. When the nucleus of these kids got to high school, success was really borne out, because Oxford, I don't even think they were ever close to 500. And then we found a young teacher, Paul McDivitt.
Okay.
He was our first true outside-the-box wrestling coach.
Now, did he have experience at coaching wrestling?
Brand new.
Okay, so he's just willing.
He was a young teacher looking for his first teaching job, and I said, we got to find a guy like that.
Yeah.
And Don Maskell was in on it. I think Don was the athletic director that helped get him hired.
Absolutely.
And Bud was good with the idea.
I imagine you're hanging with all these guys, just talking and connecting and
We're trying to figure out a direction.
Keep the logs going on the fire.
That's exactly right. And I've got some real pride in the sense of Oxford had 2 kids in the history of the program ever place in the state meet. And that would have been a Terry Gillespie and a Todd George. Mm-hmm. And then my son's freshman year, we had 3.
Wow, that's great.
More than the history of the program.
Great. That fills you up. Yeah. That's good.
And a state champ 2 years later.
Wow. Gotta be a great rejoicing for that.
It just makes me smile.
So then, are you still involved?
Not really.
Okay.
I'm around. I still am a donation guy.
Right.
And cable TV, I'm the announcer for the meet for that.
Right.
But am I hands-on? No. I'm a resource.
It seems like when you talk about that, there are people who plant, there are people who water, and there are people who harvest. You planted a bunch of little seedlings a long time ago, and now they're big old solid strong trees, and they wouldn't exist without the work you did. That's remarkable.
It's a source of pride.
I would think so. Probably a lot of boys who are now men are saying, because of him, I'm a better man.
Yeah.
All right. Good.
And the thing I really feel I get now is I'll see kids in Myers or wherever.
Yep, sure.
Coach Doug, Coach Doug.
Yep.
And I'm trying for my darndest. I can't, they've changed quite a bit from when they were in the 3rd or 4th grade.
Yep.
And maybe they never went on to high school.
Sure.
But I meant something to them.
But good. Let's look, this is great. We have to kind of wrap this up. But give me a sense for what you'd like to do in the future. Would you like to travel, or as you wind out of work, what do you want to do?
Well, my wife and I bought a motorhome, and I told you this story off the set. Bought a new motorhome. It was our second motorhome. Had an old one when the kids were growing up. And I left that in South Carolina at a junkyard because a semi took us out. Oh, yeah. We were pulling our Jeep, and that was kind of my goal, because I'm at the stage now where I take more time off from work than I ever did when I was younger. And we love to travel. The UP has always been such a major part of our life. We would probably average 1 trip a year up there. We've been to Florida for a couple of weeks now in the winters. I don't believe I'm ready to commit to a full snowbird activity. And we plan on keeping our home that we have now over on Fish Lake forever. And it'll probably go to either Michael or Aileen, one of my kids who are local. But other than that, we've traveled. We've never restricted ourselves. We've been to islands. We've been to Jamaica. We've been to destination weddings and done many things like that. But the grandkids and the family, I want to stay close to.
Bravo. That's the important stuff.
It really is.
Well, I thank you so much for giving us an idea of all the things that helped to get you to the point where you've made commitments and done things that affect this community. And that's a wonderful thing. So thank you for your time. We appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
That's all for today. Chuck Cameron for Oxford Community TV. Have a great day.